There are cannons on the ground, and there are cannons on the heights as well. These cannons had belonged to the Allied forces fighting against the Russians, but they had been taken earlier in the day. The British are now wondering how they can take them back. Lord Fitzroy is going to send a message to the forces arrayed at the valley below that he wants to unleash a charge against the Russian forces that are massed on the heights. He has got a position where he can look over and see that these guns are being used quite effectively on the heights against the British soldiers, and so he wants to try to blunt their deadly effectiveness against the armies in the battle. However, this order is transmitted to a young man named Captain Louis Nolan through a couple of officers that it takes before it gets to him. Captain Nolan is going to take this order to the man who is in charge of the overall coordination of efforts on the ground, Lord Lucan. Lord Lucan is going to receive the order, and he is going to misinterpret the order, or the order is miscommunicated to him, depending on who you believe, and instead order one of the brigades he commands to make a nice suicidal charge down one of the valleys. He commands two brigades, the Heavy Brigade, commanded by Brigadier General Scarlett under him, and the Light Brigade, which is commanded by Lord Cardigan. Now, just to make this that much more fun, Cardigan and Nolan are brothers-in-law, and they despise each other. There's very bad blood there. Well, as he is processing this order, Lucan looks at this and says, well, it appears that they are to charge down and take the guns in the valley. And that seems to be the impression that was conveyed when the order was delivered to him as well. So again, it goes back and forth. Who was responsible? Was it misinterpretation? Was it an assumption on Lucan's part? We will never know, though people line up on different battlefields and still fight constantly over who is responsible. Cardigan is ordered forward with the information that he is to charge into the valley below, not the height above. Cardigan sets out, and the Army, the Light Brigade, separates itself from the main force with 673 men and begins a suicidal charge down the length of the valley with cannon firing from above and cannon firing from in front as well. We would love to ask Captain Nolan exactly what he conveyed to Lucan, but we were forever deprived of that opportunity because one of the first people killed is Captain Nolan. So we forever have unsettled the question of whether he miscommunicated or whether Lucan misinterpreted. The Light Brigade is torn to pieces as they pursue this attack down this nearly 1 mile stretch of battlefield. They are hit by cannon, they are hit by musket fire. It is a horrendous moment. Ultimately, they are going to lose 110 people killed outright. They lose about 100 simply due to wounds suffered afterward or injuries that will take a long time to heal. It will take these men out of action for a while. So 110 killed, probably about 129 wounded or incapacitated in some way. Cardigan just basically flies down the battlefield without hardly looking back. He gets to the Russian entrenchments. They actually do take the guns at the end of the valley, and then he turns around and looks back and he realizes that a good portion of his force has been cut to ribbons. He will either walk or run back, depending on whose accounts you believe, and he will give Lucan a pretty strong tongue lashing. He'll prance around and talk about how he was robbed, and then that night he'll go spend some time on his luxury yacht moored offshore while everyone else considers the fallout and deals with, of course, the tragedy and the emotions that arise in the aftermath of it. The war itself is going to end with the break of the siege of Sevastopol in September of 1855. And by March of 1856, peace negotiations have resulted in the Russians backing off, the Russians also backing off of their position, asserting that they have a right to regulate the religious life surrounding the holy sites in the Holy Land in Palestine. They will give up those claims. They will also give up their claim things about the campaign. That and the work of Florence Nightingale, who really changes the entire tone of nursing and medical care for soldiers during this conflict, are two of the most immortal moments of the Crimean War. The British, of course, have got to immortalize everything. And certainly, in their minds, this charge down the field by the Light Brigade was worthy of placement in the annals of British history alongside Agincourt, the Armada conflict, and Blenheim. Even though it's not all that successful, it's actually kind of crazy, and it was all brought about by a mistake. Still, there's something stirring and heroic about it that really dovetails with the British mindset, the British noble outlook for the power and glory of empire. Alfred Lord Tennyson had become the poet laureate of Great Britain in 1850 upon the death of William Wordsworth. He read a newspaper account in 1854 of what occurred, and in the aftermath of his reading that account, he wrote a very stirring narrative poem which was published in the newspaper called The Examiner on December the 9th, 1854. And as we close, I'm going to read this stirring poem. I'm not saying that these words have anything to do with the experience of final exam. You can make your own judgment about that. But what better way to close the semester than to read these stirring words by Alfred Lord Tennyson. The charge of the Light Brigade. Half a league, half a league, half a league onward. All in the valley of death rode the 600. Forward the Light Brigade, charge for the guns, he said, into the valley of death rode the 600. And 73, but you know, this is poetry, not precision. Forward the Light Brigade, was there a man dismayed? Not though the soldier knew someone had blundered. Theirs not to make reply, theirs not to reason why, theirs but to do and die. Into the valley of death rode the 600. Cannon to the right of them, cannon to the left of them, cannon in front of them, volleyed and thundered. Stormed out with shot and shell, boldly they rode and well. Into the jaws of death, into the mouth of hell, rode the 600. Flashed all their sabers there, flashed as they turned in air. Sabering the gunners there, charging an army while all the world wondered. Plunged in the battery's smoke, right through the line they broke. Cossack and Russian reeled from the saber stroke. Shattered and sundered, then they rode back, but not the 600. Cannon to the right of them, cannon to the left of them, cannon behind them, volleyed and thundered, stormed out with shot and shell, while horse and hero fell. They that had fought so well came through the jaws of death, back for the mouth of hell, and all that was left of them left the 600. When can their glory fade? Oh, the wild charge they made. All the world wondered. Honor the charge they made. Honor the Light Brigade. Noble 600. And so, despite what Monty Python said, there are at least a few people that shed a man's tear or two over the departed glories of Imperial Britain. And here's one final little shout